Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining our latest Nialli webinar series webinar. I'm thrilled to be welcoming Robert Zimmerman as our guest speaker today. So we'll just give folks a few minutes to get online here. I know it's our first time hosting this series using Zoom, so the process might be a little bit different just to sign in and join the webinar. So we're on standby if you're having any technical issues or difficulties. Just a couple of housekeeping items I'll go over. We are recording today's session, so we will have it up on our website as well as our YouTube channel likely later today or early tomorrow. Anyone that's signed up, I will send out an email as well so you can get the recap and a link to the recording. As well, we've got the Q&A live, so if you've got any questions throughout the webinar, don't hesitate to throw them in chat. We've got lots of time allocated at the end to answer any questions, but if we get any juicy, good questions, we'll always jump in and answer those as well. So yeah, just a couple of other items that are on the go right now. Today's webinar series is very thought leadership focused. We're really getting in on like industry advancement and best practices. If you're looking for more of a deep dive into Nialli software, we don't really cover that in today's session, but we do run another series called our Discover Nialli Lunch and Learn series. So these are virtual lunch and learns you can join. We host them once a month. We kind of rotate through the time zones. Added bonus, this does include lunch if you're new to working with us, so you'll get Uber Eats, make it more worthwhile showing up over lunch hour. And this is a great opportunity to really like do a deep dive into using Nialli Visual Planner and our software. So highly encourage you to check that out. It's up on our website. You can also scan the QR code if you'd like to learn more. And we also do lots of stuff in real life. So we've got a whole whackload of events coming up this fall, including our building transformation show in Halifax this summer. So definitely stay tuned to our events page if you'd like an opportunity to come meet our team in person. I know we'll be at the CMMA show. We've got LCI Congress, Procore Groundbreak, DPIA. So it's back to back to back to back this fall. So definitely, if you're going to be at any of these shows, keep an eye out for us. We'd love to connect and meet with you in person. All right, so that is my intro spiel. I'd like to introduce our man of the hour, Robert Zimmerman. So thank you, Robert, so much for joining us. And I think maybe, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, good morning. Good morning. Yeah, it's good to be here.
So I think before we dive into the conversation, maybe if you can just share a little bit about your backgrounds and kind of what got you into the construction industry and into this space, because it's always an interesting career journey. So
yeah, well, I think I tripped into it somehow where you need a job. You graduate from college, you need a job, you need something to do. Got to pay the bills. So I graduated from Purdue University and the engineering, Cold War was just over. And they had ripped down the wall and the defense projects all kind of dried up. So in my engineering degree, I was standing in line behind probably 15 to 20 other seasoned engineers at the time. So it's just one of those things where I needed a job. And so I had always worked kind of construction around the farm with my dad, and his idea was a good time was pouring concrete and building barns. So I ended up jumping on a framing crew and started framing houses, and then ended up going into the apprenticeship program for commercial construction at a union shop that I was working for. Then a little bit later on. So that's kind of the entry point into construction. And then you realize that now that I'm, 35 years into it, it's like, wow, okay, there's my journey is just kind of started off, just needing to pay the bills. But then all of a sudden it turned into this career where I've ended up, owning my own companies, and have worked pretty much every side of the industry I can think of when it comes to construction. So kind of brought me full circle to where I am today, which is researching researching the industry, researching the pain points in the industry, researching the effects and the helping patterns, I guess I would say, the technology that can really kind of hopefully bring us into a age where we can build better, smarter, faster, those kind of things.
Makes a lot of sense. Do you have kind of any area of construction that really stood out to you as kind of your favorite, like in terms of a role to like where you're happiest when you're out doing the physical work? Do you really like the management side? Are you really
I got to be honest,
with what you do now in consulting type work?
Yeah, I still love being out in the field, building things. I have a small, I still run a small little carpentry company, and you know, much to my wife's disappointment, like she's like, "Hey, you need to come home from the shop. We got some stuff we got to do." I love being out in the shop. I do. I love watching the builds go on and being a part of it, and I still get out there and build some. I like to build furniture, so the build part is still a big part of what I love to do, even though that's not the part that um, I s- I get to spend most of my time in, but I do love it there. I think it's a part. I think that building part, when you're actually involved in the process and you're amongst it. I don't know. I think that's the time when you start to see all of those things that you've thought about all come together. All the planning processes, all the different things that I talk about a lot. I like to see it when it really comes to fruition out there in the field. I think that's my favorite part.
That's very fair. I feel like it's very satisfying to like build something with your hands and have something to show for it
It's
versus being the
extremely
desk
satisfying.
jockey. So
Yeah, it's extremely satisfying. It's, kind of like when I was first, building houses in the residential world. It was something else to kind of drive up to a slab, in the morning at, 5 a.m. Before the sun peaks up, and there's nothing there. There's just a slab of concrete on the ground, and you're getting ready to go, throw up some walls. And then by the end of the day, you've got, your first floor framed, and you look back at it and you go, wow, okay, that's cool. It's a sense of accomplishment that happens kind of every day. And when you can see that kind of major thing come together, it really is something else.
makes a lot of sense. So I think diving into today's topic on the webinar, we mentioned in the title that well-run construction jobs should be boring, but I think a lot of people like they associate boring with kind of negative connotation. But in your view, you kind of see things differently. You think that construction, it should be at least the process of planning it should be boring. And so maybe kind of explain that view and why you see things differently and why boring can be kind of a good thing in this industry.
Yeah, well, boring to me means that you've done the work ahead of time that keeps keeps you from having to put out fires. It's it's not that it's not exciting or it's not wonderful to see something come together, kind of like what I was just saying. Love it when, you see something frame up or you start to see pieces come together, and that's very exciting, right? But what's not exciting is when you start to see pieces come together and there's 12,000 pounds of stress, on you to get this done, or you're waiting on something and you should have probably ordered it, earlier. There was a time I skipped it, I missed it, we didn't do enough planning. That's the kind of area where that doesn't need to be exciting. You don't need to be excited about your mistakes or unplanned areas that you can't get excited about that. You want that part to be boring in a sense. You want to know that, yeah, I've done all my due diligence on this project and now I can see it come together, and the day to day it's really just putting out maybe a few small fires. Got an instance over here that you couldn't control, and that's that, and that's the status quo, not the, oh holy cow, the sky is falling because these pieces aren't coming together. This trade didn't show up, or something happened over here that just absolutely blows the project out of the water. And now you've got to, basically pay the piper. You got to tell somebody, you got to figure out how to fix it. And everybody's going to know that it's on your shoulders. You don't want that kind of excitement. We need these jobs to be boring. It really needs to be, the status quo needs to be, I'm putting out a few fires here, but basically everything's looking pretty good.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And we've also, seen that like a lot of what makes a project successful or, a failure starts long before the shovels ever hit the dirt. So maybe we can talk a little bit about the pre-planning process and, why you feel that's so important to getting jobs like off on the right foot and, running them in a more stable, well, maybe even boring fashion, but like avoiding those
Yeah.
unnecessary surprises that don't need to happen.
Well, I think that's what happens a lot of times. Um, when you say boring, those details, trying to go through that, doing that paperwork, doing that due diligence at the beginning of the project. And I think there's a big difference between what some folks would call planning, and then there's scheduling, and then there's different phases. For me, a good plan not only has a good schedule, but a good plan has the how to build it part in it. A lot of the time, we just take as this is what we're building, and we don't consider the, well, how are we building that, right? And I'm not talking about things like hanging drywall, right? Everybody knows how to hang drywall. I One instance for me in particular was we were long before a job. We were walking this. It was probably going to be about a 5,000 to 6,000 square foot restaurant. It was in the bottom of a high rise, and they wanted us to put a scrubbing machine, basically an air scrubber, that would scrub all the air that they would then exit the building. And these scrubbers are very, very large. And so then I was asking the architect, so where are you planning on putting it? Well, in a 2D drawing, it fits right in this one, section of this area. It goes, it's going to fit in this room right here. Well, I started looking at the drawings, and I started looking at the openings on the drawing. I'm like, well, can you tell me how you're going to fit it through that 4 foot opening when it's, 6 feet wide and, 8 feet tall, and it's just not going to fit in that room unless you want me to take it apart, put it back together, and put it in there. And so that's the thing that I'm talking about, is we're talking about areas where you've got complex machinery or complex pieces that are going to go into maybe a pre-existing area, or you've got to figure out how to get that machinery on site before you build that area, so that way when it builds in, it's already there, it stays, it's going to be there forever. There's a lot of how are we going to get there that never gets decided on, because we're so anxious to get out there and get the picks and shovels into the ground, kind of like to your what you were saying. That everybody wants to start moving dirt, but the boring part is where it's going to count when you're sitting down and going, okay, how are we going to do that? And it has to get very, very detailed in that space, because by the time you get about 3 months in and you've got concrete poured and you got walls going up and you've got everything kind of going on, and then you find one of these mistakes, it's really going to impact your day. It's going to impact your week. It's going to impact your month, may impact your whole year, because the bottom line will be we really missed that one. And there seems to be a lot of that in our industry. Seems to be a lot of it. Wow, we missed that. How do we miss it? Well, we keep making the same mistake over and over again. We fail to plan, so we plan to fail.
Yeah, and I think one piece of that equation too is like some of those challenges start at the outset of the project, the way jobs are bid, and sometimes setting those expectations with project owners, like, you have to sell with a certain degree of optimism, or you're never going to get shovels in the dirt and get the job started. But at the same time, like contractors can quickly find themselves in hot water if you're not factoring in all those contingencies, and like you're coming in being the really low cost bidder. So, do you kind of have any recommendations for like getting things off on the right foot, like setting transparent objectives and stuff with owners, and just making sure that like, yes, you got to play the game of this industry and the fact that like things revolve around low bids, but like how do you take it in a direction that make sure that you're not cutting corners and coming up short. So
Yeah, that's it's a really loaded question there. There's always going to be a ton of optimism at the front end of a job. Everybody does it. I do it. I still do it to this day. Okay, I'm going to do this a little bit better. Obviously, it's about incremental improvement and those types of things. And yeah, we do it a little bit better each time. We never quite get it right, but that optimism, and this is why I say pre-planning is so vital. Not that it kills the optimism, but it gives the optimism. It gives optimism a set of parameters to operate within. A lot of time we have this open scope of optimism, which says, oh, we're going to be able to do all these things, and it never gets realistic. We have to be very, very realistic, and we have to be realistic with our client or our owners who are saying, I need this done in 2 months. And we have to say, really, is 2 months, or I need this done in 2 years. Can we really do that? And even though we have a new set of owners, I would say they're very, very informed, and they're not dumb people, but they've got an agenda, right? They need that building or whatever they're creating to deliver. They need a return on investment, and so the faster they can get to that ROI, that's their focus. And so their push is, well, I need this done in 2 years, or I need this done, whatever the timeline is. That's when they need it, because they're not looking at the how, right? They're not looking about what it takes to build it. That becomes your problem. That's not my problem. It's your problem. You want to take this job on, you solve those problems. Okay, that's fine if you're a GC or a subcontractor and you want to do those things. Okay, great. But remember what your job is. Your job is not the schedule necessarily. The job says it's how to make that schedule happen. It's the how to with inside of that. And so if you're not spending the time, you know, figuring out what's going to get in your way to actually make this schedule feasible, because they're going to hold you to it. They're going to, that master schedule rides right on that contract, and they're going to hold you to it. And we've just become an industry somehow of, we know what we said we were going to do, right? We know we said we were going to make this, but here's what happened. And and this came up. And it's because we spent 2 weeks or 3 weeks, you know, not wanting to get undercut bids. So we waited to the last minute to turn our bid in. And then it was, then they picked low bidder or picked mid bidder, whatever. But then those trades never had a say into exactly what was going on. So they leave their scope a little bit short, and everybody accepts the scope because it's last minute on everything. And now we've got accepted scopes with lowest prices, or, mid-grade prices that doesn't quite cover everything, because everybody goes back to the fact or the statement that, the bid set was really only 80% complete or 90% complete. Again, we shorted on everything from the very, very beginning, and then wonder why we fall short at the end. And that cycle continues to repeat over and over and over again. I don't know if I even answered a question there, but just the way that I see it is that the less time we spend, even telling, less time we spend on the planning part, then that means the less time we spend educating the ownership on exactly what their project's going to entail, right? And then there's it. I'm not saying everybody does it. I'm just saying that it seems as though when you look at the statistics of the industry and deliverability and delivering on time or on budget, and most projects don't hit those marks. No matter how educated the owner is, or no matter how good the GC is, for some reason we're not hitting those marks. My theory is that we're not making, we're not spending enough time in the boring parts of the planning of the how we're going to get there. And so I think if we spent a little bit more time with the trades on before contract, if we spent some time before contract with the trades on, can this get done, feasibility of the project, if we spent some more time looking at the details with the AEC group and saying, why did you design it this way, and is there another way that maybe we can do this, right? Instead of value engineering it, do some real engineering on it so that it makes sense. And then, then using that information to educate the owner on, this is what your product, this is our research on your product, on your asset, and this is what we think it will deliver, and this is when we think we can deliver it for you. Now, can you work your ROI numbers around that? How can we get, to a happy medium to where it says you're happy and I'm happy at the end of this contract? And we could go down a whole long road of, contracts these days, because I think we've contracted ourselves into just, legal renderings.
Yeah, the only one that's making money here are the lawyers, it
A
seems.
lot of
So.
times, it's so weird, because it's like this race to, um, to be in litigation or be in arbitration or be in mediation. It's this weird thing. It's like we're just going to go start building and we'll clear it all up. It's like fixing it in the post. You know what I mean? When they say that in the media business, oh, well, don't worry, we'll fix it in post. It's like we're going to fix it after we've already screwed it up. That doesn't seem to make any sense to me.
Yeah, I think you raise a lot of very valid points there, and like the industry should be thinking more about those contingencies and just doing a bit more planning up front. And I think like there's stuff that has to be done on both sides, and it's going to be a slog to get change
Right.
opinions and minds and get people in that framework. But
It's
I think there's some
crazy.
yeah, there's some practical stuff I think we could probably focus on too, just even in like the planning and scheduling process. I know in our lead up to this, we kind of talked about, there's a little bit of a tendency to treat planning and scheduling as a one-time exercise. And, there's so much heavy focus on like the what and what's in the master schedule. And your conversation around the how. So maybe kind of diving into that a little bit more, like how should contractors really be looking at things differently and thinking about planning and scheduling and kind of taking a different view than maybe they are today?
Well, one way, there are different contracts out there now, rather than just straight design build or lump sum, agreements, those kind of things. So there's different ways to contract things, which helps, which can help. Getting the trades involved early within those scopes and those types of things is definitely a way to do it. Um, Specifically engaging, I think technology itself can engage more with the owner to give them more insight into what this project really looks like, even from the front end. You know, during contract time or what we call pre-construction. A lot of times, I think there's a lot of things in there that get skipped over, again, because everybody wants to get to the construction. And so they skip some steps in pre-construction. Um, and then, during construction is, which I think, Nialli's doing a great job with in the idea of a pull plan is making sure everybody's still on the same page, even after the picks and shovels, even after the dirt's starting to move or the concrete's being poured, making sure that everybody's still in line. You know what I mean? And if there is a problem, in that plan, that everybody's involved in, if there is a problem, then you've got people on the ground communicating about it, and nobody's left out in the lurch, right? We have the technology. We're more connected these days than ever. We've got more communication, more knowledge, more information out there, and yet we still can't seem to decide what tool to use, and why can't we agree on, hey, this communication was here? Now we blame things on fragmented technology or fragmented information, siloed data, those kind of things. It's like, okay, so we created technology so we could communicate better, but yet we still want to fragment the data and we still want to silo the data. Why? Well, because our products don't integrate. It's technology's problem. Is it technology's problem or is it our problem? I think there's tons of tools out there that may have helped, but then if we look at the end of the day, maybe it's our processes that we're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole a little bit, or we've used technology to just expedite a bad process.
Yeah, I think that's very true. If you try to automate something that's broken and fragmented, like the technology is going to appear as broken and fragmented, even though,
Yeah,
the source of the problem maybe that, you needed to kind of sit down and figure out that process piece first. And
yeah.
so, oh,
Well,
sorry,
I
go
was
ahead.
I was going to add to that. I mean, on the ConTech Exec podcast, I interview not only construction folks, but I interview so many tech founders and not startups, but some startups, but really established technology companies and their CEOs, and we all talk about this very same thing. Like a lot of times, we're not solving for first principles. Most of the time, we're creating like a bandage for a bullet hole. It's really weird, but it seems like, well, that's what the industry says they want, so that's what we create for them. It's not that we approach it from a different direction and say, what do we want the end result to be, and what created the problem in the first place. It's just much easier a lot of times because we've got some really, really smart people um, who go, "Oh, I see your problem. Okay, well, I think we can solve it this way," and they just say, then they drop that solution there. Okay, these point solutions, right? Oh, some of them are great, but on the overall, we're still struggling with massive amounts of communication capability, but yet no way to tell why we still can't communicate. Why we still can't be on the same page? It's a strange conundrum to me.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a million-dollar problem to solve. I guess just in terms of kind of bringing it back to poll planning, because that's obviously near and dear to our heart at Nialli. You know, there's kind of a difference between teams that are like going through the motions, and I think there's a lot of surface level stuff out there happening where teams are like, yeah, we're poll planning, we're doing this process, versus the teams that are like truly living and breathing it and actually, taking those methods to heart. So like, are there sort of some ways you can sort of differentiate between teams that are truly bringing the trades into the planning process versus teams that are saying, yeah, 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 we're checking box, they're poll planning, we're doing doing all of these steps.
Mhm. I have been on job sites and worked with construction companies that were doing pole planning, and they had the full room. They were doing it exactly right. They're doing just what they needed to do. Um, and I'm not going to blame the owner, but sometimes people people get involved that don't understand the reason for a pole plan, and maybe it's folks outside of its influences outside. I was recently on a job site where, and I can't name any names or anything. It was just say it's a very, very large company that building a facility, and they have a master schedule. They have a pull plan going on based on the master schedule, but yet because of uh, optics or something like that, they would say, well, the owner's rep would come in and say, no, well, this is the new schedule for the week. It had nothing to do with the pull plan. It was like, and these guys were trying to follow the pull plan, like, oh no, they're going to, but they'd come in and they'd say, interference on understanding what a pull plan means. They'd come in and go, no, we need to do this because we need more people up here because we got somebody coming in to go take a look at this, going to take a look. And there's this strange example kind of out there that I saw. Like, if you have this, you have cars running in a circle and all are going at 30 mile an hour in this circle, right? And it feels like everything's running smooth. And one of those cars drops 1 mile per hour, right? You suddenly start to see the effect of how that interruption of 1 mile per hour over the course of 10 cars then started to cause backups. It started to cause a traffic jam. 1 mile per hour. I mean, one little instance, it's almost like this weird domino effect that then multiplies upon itself. And that is exactly what happens in a construction uh, event, right? You're trying to create, and as a supervisor or foreman or whatever, even a project manager, you're trying to create like that flow, right? You're trying to create, okay, I've got these guys over here, they're doing this, and this guy's over here, and then when they're done, they're going to move and they're going to switch over here, they're going to do this and that, and we're trying to get everybody kind of flow so that it feels like you're getting things done in a logical order, so that you don't have to go back and do a bunch of stuff. Well, one of those gets off where there's, and I've had this happen to me working in a data center. We had somebody ordered the doors early, and then they dropped them right in the middle of my data center space here that I had where the racks were going to go. I have these doors, and I'm like, okay, now I must have moved those doors like 4 or 5 different times, right? Just trying to get them out of the way. How much time did that waste, and what did that, interrupt, in everybody else's day? How many different times I had to do that? And that's the kind of example when you start messing with the flow, when you start messing with then you create new bottlenecks that you haven't solved for. And so, like I said, you can be utilizing a pull plan, which I think is a great job, but it's not necessarily how effectively you're making the pull plan work. It's what interruptions happen inside of that pull plan or whatever execution plan that you have that you then have to handle outside of that. It's kind of like those small fires. We don't want big fires, we want small fires. But what happens a lot of times is people fail to plan early on, and then this big fire gets dropped into your lap, and then that disrupts the whole thing. So I really, again, I love the idea. Again, like I said, we've got the technology. Nialli has developed a great technology with the pull planning and having it all there in a digital format. I think that's fantastic. Execution of it can be great. What happens when you get punched in the nose, right? How do you deal with it? And then I think that comes down to a personal level of really who's in charge and how well do they handle, those kind of problems.
Makes a lot of sense. So I guess we're kind of at the top of the half hour here. So kind of before we turn it over to Q&A, is there any additional kind of insights or kind of final thoughts you want to share with the audience today?
Oh, well, I think, we're at a very, very interesting time in the age of AI where we have the ability to really start crunching these numbers, start taking the data that we collect. I mean, obviously, we collect mounds and mounds of data, and yet we don't use but 5% of it, maybe 10% of it. Depends on the company, of course. But it's just we're at a point here where we can really start to utilize that. We've got the tools. And I think that's one of the things that we definitely have to start doing is start taking our historical facts, right? Not suppositions. I don't think RFIs are what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about real data, maybe real operational data, like units over hours, those kind of things, productivity. Start utilizing that to then really start to map out and use that in your planning or your even pre-planning of to try to figure out feasibility. That's one of my biggest things is like, is the job feasible? And then take the data that you have to go, how can we make it feasible, or how can we make it more feasible? I guess how can we build it, and what's the reality behind that? And I think that's my biggest thing is we have to start using technology as it was intended, meaning we come up with the ideas behind it when then we use technology to crunch the data because now we have that ability.
Makes a lot of sense. Awesome. Well, I'd like to turn it over to our audience if anyone does have any questions for Robert. He's got a ton of knowledge in both the technology side and in the field. So definitely feel free to ask any questions you may have. We'll just give people a minute or so to pop in any questions. I know one other kind of theme we talked about in the lead up to this webinar was, technology like making or breaking processes. So we've hit on it a bit, but kind of where do you see technology sort of having the most impact right now versus where do you see it, maybe being a hindrance or just kind of getting in the way of process or people trying to do what they're trying to do?
Yeah, I think again, I think technology where it is now, especially with the use of large language models and these things, really um, should be focused on utilizing the historical data uh, to create to give us some insight on how we've done it in the past versus how we may need to do it in the future. I think that's the biggest part that we need to do. What I don't, what I'm where it would get in the way is when people start to use it as a shortcut to solving problems. Uh, Construction is very, very human, relationship based industry, um, and we're it is so diverse in some of the methodology is so diverse in the way that we behave around each other. Quite honestly, we have to be real about knowing that we're a little bit crazy for being in this industry because it's never the same every day. So it's going to be very, very difficult for even a very smart computer to try to figure out, why we did it a certain way. So we have to go back to, kind of leaning on our our best experiences and then using some data to kind of back it up. So technology can hurt you. Obviously, too much technology, large data stacks, redundant services, those types of things, they impact your bottom line, but they also just impact the confusion of communication, especially when you have multiple sources and not necessarily one source of truth, which everybody talks about one source of truth, but I don't think it's ever existed. And then, so it can hurt you in many ways, but I think from a company standpoint, you have to finally decide where does it help us and focus on those areas first instead of, because I think what happens a lot of times is these companies and people in these industries, they have so many fires to put out. They don't have enough thumbs to plug all the holes, right? Like the Dutch boy kind of thing. They need to start figuring out, 4 or 5 of these that, okay, let's focus on those and get those solved. And then maybe next focus on the next 4 or 5. And you might be surprised that once you start to solve these problems, incrementally in small spaces, some of these others may go away. That's because they may be just contingent because you didn't solve this area first. And so then it's affecting this other area, but you got to start making a choice, about that. So that's where I think, the industry can utilize technology, but be wary of it in the fact that don't let it try to start making decisions for you. You still need your intuition, you still need your experience and your knowledge.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, garbage in, garbage out. If your process, you're just trying to automate a process that doesn't really exist, or you haven't built a plan and you're just throwing technology at it, it's not really going to do what you think it's
That
going to be able to do, and it's just going to obscure and kind of you think it's going well, but it's maybe not going as well as you think. So
I totally agree with that, and I think what the scariest part of the age of AI is are we feeding it garbage? Are we, are we feeding the garbage? We've been feeding other things garbage. We've been feeding our own processes garbage for a long time. Are we doing the same thing with large language models? We have to be careful of that, and
definitely.
we have to be cognizant of our own behavior. There's one thing for sure that I think AI will teach us. It's what it means, to say somebody is human, uh, because we are rare creatures in our decision processes sometimes. I'm trying to say that in a nice way. Sometimes we make some really dumb decisions, and it makes no sense, why we did what we did, but we did it anyway. And statistically, we continue to make those same decisions.
All right. Well, I don't actually see any questions in the chat. I guess we've got a quieter audience today.
It's
So
totally fine. I guess I explained everything perfectly. So I love it. That's great.
exactly. So we can wrap up a little early. And Robert, we really appreciate having you on. Lots of wisdom and great insights that you've shared today. So I'll just put up your contact information if anybody is interested in connecting with you.
Yeah.
And then yeah, we can wrap up for today. So here I'll just I've got a slide up here.
All right.
Make
Very
sure I've
good.
got the right one. Oh,
Very good.
do I have it showing properly? I feel like
Yeah.
PowerPoint
Yeah.
always
It's fine.
mixes up my screen. Oh wait, here. I think I just need to swap presenter. There we go. So yeah, if you want to scan the QR code, connect with Robert. He's on LinkedIn. Follow the ConTech Exec podcast. He brings on lots of great, interesting speakers.
Yeah, we have a good time on the ConTech Exec podcast talking about some of the stuff we talked about today. So it's always a good time. So yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.